Well, hello and good evening, and welcome to episode 3 of Humanity versus Insanity, the Crane Report. And tonight is the third and final part of our discussion on the reframing of British police. And of course, this is a very pertinent topic for me in particular, seeing as I have had some very up-close and personal experiences of British policing, both at Borkham and more recently at Barton Moss. Now, I have to say that though I don't want to spend too much talking about Barton Moss on the Crane Report tonight, I should be doing a little bit more about that on Fracking Nightmare, which will go out at 9 o'clock this evening. But over the past week, we've seen an increase in the aggression being perpetrated by the police, Greater Manchester Police, at Barton Moss. And we'll be looking at some footage, some quite disturbing footage. But nonetheless, what we are witnessing at Barton Moss is the absolute irrefutable evidence that the British police force is now nothing more than a corporate enforcement service. The days of the traditional British bobby are unfortunately behind us. But before we go on to that with Brian Gerrish, what I would like to do is to remind you about a very important event that's coming up in May. This is the Alternative View 5. For those of you who aren't aware, there were 4 previous Alternative View events, but we haven't hosted one for almost 4 years. So this will be AV5. It's being held at the Staverton Park Hotel, right in the heart of the country in Staverton, Gloucestershire. It's a residential event running from the Friday evening on May 16th right through to Sunday evening on May the 18th. But there is an opportunity to stay an extra night for free. Then we have some great speakers lined up, not least Mr. Gerrish himself.
Thank you very much, Ian.
That's all right. And Patrick Henningsen, who many of you will be familiar with, an outstanding geopolitical analyst. Alex G., Neil Sanders, a very, very astute young man looking at the mind control and the influence of the media in reframing British society. So it's going to be an outstanding event. It's going to be a very unusual event. It's going to be a conference that is intended to make a difference. One of the other aspects of this event is that we will be launching a new political initiative. An initiative that, if everything goes as we hope it will become a thorn in the side of the establishment. It's a political initiative like none that has ever occurred before. And the event will hopefully attract people who are determined not just to come along to an event and then walk away having had a nice weekend, but attract people who want to come to the event, to network, and then go away from the event with the determination that they are going to make a difference and that they are going to cease this insanity that is percolating through British society right now. And I think that the vast majority of people watching this program will be more than aware of that. And we will be pursuing other avenues where British society is under attack in the coming weeks. And next week, we're going to be focusing on weather wars, which I think should get a lot of attention. But Brian, thank you for coming back for
My pleasure.
week 3. I think this has probably been one of the most comprehensive breakdowns of reframing that we've had the opportunity to work through, and hopefully people will actually look through the previous 2 editions of the Crane Report and just see how we have worked through this unfortunate agenda that's being perpetrated on the British Police Service.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground. In a way, it's sad, isn't it, that we've got to concentrate on the police. But at the end of the day, we all need the police because we need the police to be doing the right jobs. We need them to be doing it in the right way. And if they're doing it in the right way, they should be getting credit for doing it. So I think that part of our job is to actually show the police themselves what is being done to them. And I can imagine if you're a policeman or a woman and you're busy, you're out there on the job, you probably come off shift and you're knackered. And life goes around in a cycle. You're not analysing the police. So I think it's our job to be having a look from a detached viewpoint at what's happening to the police.
Absolutely. And as we have emphasised on the previous 2 editions, we are not tarring every police officer with the same brush. I mean, we absolutely recognise there are some outstanding people within the police service, and we know that many of those people are actually very disturbed and embarrassed by the behaviour that they see from their colleagues.
Yeah, that's right. I wonder whether you just wanted to cover a couple of your magazines before we get straight into the thing. Well, that's a very good idea. Well,
thank you for the prompt.
Just because they happen to be there, and then we'll be straight back onto the police.
Absolutely. No, that's thanks for the reminder. Many people watching this programme will be aware that I am the UK publisher of a couple of magazines. And last year, due to varying reasons, we took the decision to actually print these magazines in New Zealand and ship them over. Unfortunately, that proved to not be the right decision, and the shipping has been delayed beyond anything that is reasonable. But I'm pleased to announce that the ship has docked in the UK. The magazines are being delivered to me next Friday, and we have people all ready to start the distribution process at the weekend. So for those people who aren't aware, Natural Medicine, check it out on the website, which is www.nznaturalmed.co.uk. And the second publication, sorry, let's go to the next publication here. This is Uncensored. And yes, indeed, there will be 2 editions of each being mailed out to the subscribers, Natural Medicine and Uncensored. So the websites again are nznaturalmed.co.uk and uncensoredmag.co.uk. So apologies for the delays in getting these magazines out to you. We're doing everything we possibly can to return to having them printed in the UK. But anyway, they're great magazines, they're unique magazines, and how sad that the 2 best alternative publications, i.e. Nexus and Uncensored, are actually edited on the other side of the planet.
Well, is that sad, or does it show that actually we got people across the globe starting to work together? Maybe it's that. We look at it as a positive way. But yeah, it's happening.
It is indeed.
Okay, well, with just a very brief recap, we were talking about this gentleman, Ian Puddick, at the end of the last programme. A London plumber running a very big company in London. Ian discovered that his wife was having an affair. When he challenged the firm, his world erupted, and it ended up where his home was raided, his business was raided. And we have City of London police running around, and we have terrorist units, and somewhere over £1 million of money was spent, and even the judge at one of the hearings said he had never seen corruption like it. Of course, nobody was then subsequently brought to court from the police.
So this is what is commonly known as a total fit-up.
A total fit-up, and it just shows massive corruption with the police interfacing with private security companies. And you say, what's going on? Now, this is in the heart of the City of London. Mike told me just before the programme started that a couple of bankers have now been picked up. So maybe there's a bit of movement from the police doing the right thing.
Was that picked up off the floor? Or?
Well, that's a bit unfortunate. No, these were arrested for suspect crimes. But basically, what a mix. We've got this... We've got all the money from the international banking system, the corrupt banking. We've got people moving around the police. We've got private security firms. And then we've got people like Serco and G4S in one big pot. But we also, I think, showed this slide, if we can just bring it up. And this is where we actually had the police telling the BBC what they could publish and what. So it says here, called to ask them to amend the line in the story suggesting that the counter-terrorism officers were involved in the Puddick investigation. Now, they were involved, but here we see the police manipulating the media, and it wasn't just the BBC, because if we bring in another one, they did exactly the same thing by calling The Sun, called to ask them to amend the line in the story suggesting counter-terrorism officers were involved, and they agreed to make the change. So here's the police dictating what the press are going to report. And here's the same thing with 5 News, exactly the same line. The police were running scared that basically there were going to be factually correct reports saying that counter-terrorism units were involved, which they were. So if we've got the police suppressing mainstream media, we're into a very dangerous situation, I think.
Well, we're seeing exactly the same at Barton Moss right now as well, although that may be coming down from an even higher source. But absolutely, I mean, anyone who suggests that the British press is independent, unfortunately, is living in a delusional world. Delusional world.
And what's the threat if you don't do as the police say? You get your offices raided. But of course, it works the other way around as well, because if we bring this article up here, this was from the 10th of March 2013, and we've actually got Brian Paddock, former Deputy Assistant Commissioner of the Met Police. He was beginning to complain that basically officers were being picked up and arrested. And sorry, let's see where we got it. This is what should have come up. He said, "I'm a worried man, and so are many of my former colleagues. We've done nothing wrong, but that doesn't appear to mean anything. Last Tuesday, the recently retired Assistant Commissioner for the City of London Police, Frank Armstrong, was arrested on suspicion of misconduct in the public office. 9 officers arrived at his home in southwest London, where he lives with his wife. When men like Frank Armstrong are arrested in such circumstances, we should all be worried." So here are raids going on now between the police. We know that we've had police put in prison for talking to the press. So everything's turbulent. People are suspicious of each other. I've just got one last comment on that one, which I've just put up there. Above all, almost every one of my contemporaries and I have tried to be honest and open and to act always in the public interest. Yet, despite all this, we're now worried about the 7 o'clock knock on our front doors.
Well, they're pretty lucky it's 7 o'clock, because if they weren't in the police, it'd be 4.
Well, I'm going to read a little bit out in a minute, which is a report from a lady whose house was raided by the police a few days ago, and it's quite horrific. So, but key bit here is the police are getting some of the treatment themselves, and they really don't like it. But yeah, as you say, it's not usually a 7 o'clock raid for members of the public. It's getting your door kicked in the middle of the night. So the next slide I've got here is to do with what the police are getting involved with around school children. And I've left these particular slides yellow because they were sent to me by a gentleman. And I'm going to say, I'm very sorry, I can't remember your name. I think it was Chris. But hopefully if Chris is watching the programme, he will remember these slides. So thank you very much for sending them. Well, here's the first one. Schools to get their own police stations. Police officers are to be permanently stationed in schools across the country in a drive to cut youth crime. The campaign will see the opening of one-man police stations at more than 100 secondary schools. Now, this seems to have gone into a bit of a black hole at the moment, but what we do know is that with academy schools, where you're getting schools run by corporations, we're going to see this integration with on-site security in the police. Mm-hmm. And then we get into this thing. Children from an Edgware school were made to believe aliens had landed in their playground by teachers and police. The aim of the day was to stimulate the children's minds and help develop their story writing skills. Well, was it? Because if we follow it through a bit more, this is another school here, Sandford Primary School. The kids were treated to a full UFO crash that included wreckage, brackets bomb damage, police tape and real police officers. And this was to show the children how to properly investigate the UFO brackets bombing site. Now the bomb bit has been put in by the person who created the slides here to say, well, actually what we've got going on here is that children are having their minds interfered with. Are UFO terrorist attack drills becoming something of a routine as part of the curriculum for the UK?
Well, because if I remember, this wasn't just one school. It wasn't just the creative element of a drama teacher in one school. It was pretty much across the board.
There was a number. If we bring this one back up, Mike, which you've got. So this is Lanchester Endowed Parochial Primary in County Durham. Pupils arrived to find police officers at the gate, field cordoned off with tape, forensic examiners. We wanted to do something that would engage the children. There was a lot of excitement. We were keen to make sure the experience wasn't frightening, but a lot of the children did not know what was going on. And here we've got a year 3 pupil saying, I was really shocked. One of my friends was quite upset because she's worried an alien was going to get her. what's going on here? This is conditioning of the children, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, totally.
And the police are in the middle of it. But is it a UFO, or are we talking terrorism? Is that what we're putting in their minds?
Well, we're sowing the seed that something of this ilk is possible. And, I mean, as you know, I've discussed on many occasions, those who think they are the rightful rulers of this planetary fiefdom have actually been discussing using the fake alien invasion as a means of establishing globalist control ever since 1917.
By fear.
By fear, exactly.
Absolutely. And
exactly.
What better place for them to start than to get the police into the primary schools?
Exactly.
But then on the other level, you've got initiatives where very young children are used with the police on a speed trap, and this has happened in the local Plymouth area here. You've got mature drivers being stopped by the police, and then they're faced with a child telling them that what they've done is wrong. And of course, this is applied psychology designed to mess with people's minds. Not good for the adults, not good for the children.
Well, and what it's doing is we're starting to create the 21st century version of a British Hitler Youth.
Yeah. But the police have got to pick up on what's being done here. Now, I've just cheated slightly because I've introduced a fire crew here, but this is talking about partly what diversity training is about. So a gay march, the crew was supposed to go and hand out leaflets as firefighters. They didn't want to do it. They got in trouble with the chief fire officer of Strathclyde. But down at the bottom, with a bit of a crude circle around it, it says all are to attend a course in diversity training. Now, this is creating the hive mind. You don't agree with the overall policy. You're getting pushed into areas that you feel uncomfortable with. We're not discussing the rights or wrongs of the gay issue. This is what personal officers felt they were comfortable with or not. But those who didn't get it right, we're going to put you in a diversity course and reframe you. And of course, this is being done to the police.
Absolutely.
So this really is the last section that we thought we'd come through on this edition. So the police are in a very difficult environment. It's getting very poisonous, target-driven, paper mountain, political pressure. They've got to work with a lot of other organisations in partnership, whereas previously, of course, the police would have done everything they could to work on their own. You've got to put a bit of distance between yourself and others because you could investigate them. But of course, what we're seeing around the country is the police being drawn into these collaborative networks.
And these are the open networks. I mean, these are the networks that are actually in the public domain. Most people are not aware of them. In fact, later on this evening in Fracking Nightmare, we're going to look at the incestuous interconnectivity of many companies in the Northwest, which all focus down to Peel Holdings. And that's in the public domain. But then there's what's not in the public domain.
Absolutely.
The brotherhoods. Yeah. And as we discussed a couple of editions ago, up until certainly the 1980s, it was generally acknowledged that you could not progress beyond the rank of sergeant in the British police unless you were part of the local free Masonic group.
Well, I've heard that as well, and I believe it's true because we've got officers talking about this sort of thing. But on top of that, we've now got the next layer, which is we've now got organisations like Common Purpose.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you really want to get into it, you've got perhaps a senior Freemason as a police officer who, unbeknown to him, has gone through a nice little bit of applied behavioural psychology with Common Purpose. And you've got quite a dangerous mix there, both for the public and the individual who doesn't realise what's been done to him.
Exactly.
So what's the cure? It's to get the top off it. But this was a Mirror headline, obviously, saying that something is going wrong, inside the police service. 250,000 sick days last year. They're blaming pressure of staff cuts. Now, no doubt some of these officers were playing the sickie, basically, because they wanted a day off. But part of that, I'm going to suggest, is a failure in morale of the police, because if you're a professional and you're doing the job, you're not going to skive off to have a day to watch football or something. But there must be a message in here. Police are suffering from stress. And why? Because they're dealing in an increasingly poisonous environment.
And just to put that in perspective, 250,000 sick days is about the equivalent of 1,000 man years.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, because a man work year is about 240 days.
Right. Well, I should know what the actual number of the police force is at the moment, and I've dropped the number out of my head, but certainly there's something going on. Well, what sort of stress of the police is on the police? Well, some of it is out on the beat, but some of it is to do with this sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And this, of course, was Plebgate, which went up and down like a yo-yo.
And it's still going up and down.
And it's still going up and down, but I think I'm right in saying that at least one of the police who was involved in this incident has been suspended.
Yeah. So
initially it was the politician in the wrong, and then it's gone up and down and up and down, and now we've got police in the wrong. So a wedge, you could say, being driven between the relationship between politicians and the police. Now, who is right in this incident, I don't know, but certainly if I look at the way our politicians behave, they're increasingly arrogant, the language is increasingly bad. Could I believe that this man swore at one of the policemen? I think I could. But was that the truth? We don't know. Well, there's other things go on, and this is from the Yorkshire Post, and it's a lady called Jackie Cheer, the Chief Constable of Cleveland Police, and she failed the fitness test that all the other rank and file officers have to do.
But we can't mention that because that is breaching the diversity rules. We can't make a comment about her weight.
Well, I'm going to do it because what interests me, they were doing the bleep test, which is basically they put the police officers in a sort of sports hall, and they have to run from one end to the other and back again, and a beep gives a time, and that beep speeds up. I know this very well because we used to do it in the Navy many years ago, and it's a pretty tough test. But if you end up where you've got senior officers who are obviously grossly unfit, they're not capable of being out and doing the job. So you've already got some sort of morale problem. But the reason I'm interested in this particular police force is if I can read a little bit of this. We heard Brian Paddock talking about his concerns that the police were raiding the doors of other police officers. This is the account from a daughter and her mother who had reported concerns basically over what appeared to be paedophile activity, or at least men mixing with very young and probably underage boys. So the women made a report to the local police, and then their world erupted. They're harassed. They end up with medical records changed. They have a go at sectioning the mother. And last Sunday, unfortunately, I didn't pick the message up, but these women were calling for help. There were one or two people who did speak to them on the phone, and they were screaming that police were trying to break in the house. So the text here, I won't read it for word for word because it's too long, but basically on Sunday last at approximately, between 10 and 11, after a police car was parked outside me and my mother's house for 3 hours, we called for a friend to come round because we were frightened. He stayed for a while and then left. And then the next thing is a police van pulled up and 3 officers came to my front door. I told them we wouldn't speak to them until we had our lawyer present, and we didn't consent to what they were doing. They would not leave. They got reinforcements. They got a dog handler and other officers. Now, these are 2 ladies. I think they're about 5'1" tall, so they're not big ladies. So they got a dog handler and other officers, and then I noticed one was coming to the front door with a weapon. I screamed and called as many people as I could on the phone. My mother grabbed the shoe rack as they were breaking in our front door and trying to smash the window in. She slammed the shoe rack back at the door and shouted, "If you kill me, you'll be done for murder." This lasted about an hour, possibly half an hour. It was horrible. And then they were smashing our back door. My mum ran to the back door and did the same there with the shoe rack and took the dog on the leash. And then they got in and they sprayed my mum and the dog with CS gas. There were 3 and then 5 officers, one with a hoop to get the dog. My mum grabbed for a can of spray and grabbed Mr. Sheen furniture polish. This is very interesting. I was video recording them on my phone. As soon as the officer with the dog hoop saw me, he sprayed me with CS gas in my eyes. I was so scared I screamed and ran. I thought they'd blinded me. My mother sprayed them back, and they ended up spraying her 3 times over her face, chest, scalp, ears and eyes.
And the alleged offence here?
Is that they'd gone to the police to report that they'd seen evidence on Facebook of a, I'm going to say possible, because it was never investigated, but a possible paedophile ring. And if people there are thinking, well, this is 2 women who were up north making this report, by some bizarre coincidence, 2 days after this incident, I had another lady calling from Cornwall, same story. She discovered pornographic pictures, including children, circulated at a local school, gone to the police, made a report, and then been harassed, followed, police at her door, and eventually social services turning up. Now, if you want to know why this is happening, I'll just give my opinion. It's because the police themselves are involved in the paedophile rings.
I would think that's probably a pretty fair bet. Or if the police themselves are not, then people who they know, possibly part of the Masonic Lodge or the establishment in some way, shape or form, are involved. And obviously they've received a phone call to tell them to shut it down. And, you know, I know that you've been looking at a lot of this in other areas, particularly with the Scottish fetish clubs. And of course, once somebody who is at a senior level in the establishment partakes in this kind of activity, they effectively lead themselves wide open. Not necessarily to overt blackmail, but then one day when the telephone call comes and says, hey, listen, we got a problem. There's 2 young ladies, or old ladies in this case, who are trying to break into this ring and expose this ring. They know too much. We need it shut down now. And what do? Oh, and by the way, if you don't go and shut it down, you know what? We've got a few photographs of you in compromising positions, and they might find their way to your wife or on the internet or whatever. I mean, it's so easy.
Well, this is absolutely it. And of course, the other thing is that the police, aside from working with social services, so the lady in Cornwall, they've gone for her children. But the other nasty little trick is they have a go at sectioning people. And this lady up north, her mother, what was the game? Well, they tried to section the mother. In fact, at one point in here, she says something like, the policeman said, oh, here we are, they were gunning to section my mother. They'd said, we're going to get you the help you need. Now, that's the threat about the sectioning. So we've got a police officer in the Cleveland area who I'm going to say has neglected herself in a big way. So, OK, we've got to take her age into account. But basically, she's unfit. She's unfit in the way her police officers are conducting themselves. And
the problem, Brian, I think, is that the junior officers, the officers that are tasked with going and breaking the door down, obviously they're just spun a yarn. I mean, they're fed a total bunch of BS to effectively fire them up and get them into the right frame of mind to go beat the doors down, to go spray the CS gas on 5'1" old ladies. You know, and they actually believe that they're doing an appropriate service.
Well, I can imagine that when they're told before they're going to do the job, they're briefed before the job, they're probably told the dog is a Doberman, when in fact it's a Jack Russell. So there's all sorts of things. But when they get there and they see who's in the house, you've got to ask this question, why do they still behave like thugs? And this is due to conditioning. Because
they can.
Yeah. Well, if we go up the line a bit, then of course we're going to come to people like this. And this is an article on Theresa May, a very, very dangerous woman in my opinion. OK, she's saying that we're going to opt out of 100 EU regulations on justice. This is just another political lie because we never pull out of this sort of stuff. But this is the woman who's sitting in the spider's web at the moment, where the police are now mixed in with the security agencies, G4S. We've got Fixated Threat Assessment Centre, which is going to section you if you cause too much trouble. And we've got something equivalent to the Stasi operating all around this one woman. So if anybody thinks, what's she famous for? She likes her shoes or boots or something.
Yeah, and didn't wasn't her husband watching some porno? or allegedly watching some...
I don't think it was Theresa May, actually,
okay.
but I think she's keen on shoes. She likes flowery shoes or something. So the image to the public is sweet, upstanding lady who likes her clothes, but what's around her a pretty vicious organisation.
This is the British equivalent of Hillary Clinton. And I don't have any doubt at all that Theresa May will do whatever it is that she either is instructed to do or feels she needs to do to support her global corporatist masters.
And shut the rest of us up.
Absolutely.
Well, here's a bit of the web. I've got a couple of these here, but if we just put some of these together. At the bottom, we've got the National Policing Improvement Agency. Now, that's actually changing to another organisation. But if we just see how some of these bits fit together, we've got the Association of Chief Police Officers. We pointed out that's a private company. We've got the College of Policing Limited. Where do we go from here? Well, this man's interesting. So he was the executive head of the National Policing Improvement Agency and into CPOL, Virtual Global Task Force Limited. European Police College. So here's the mixture in with things European. And the moment you're dealing with the European police, certainly if it's the French police, that's a paramilitary organisation. And of course, you're not dealing common law. So the whole lot being mixed together in a blob. We've got Europol, European Eurojust, which we had a bit of a talk about. Soccer's also been replaced. You'll see that in a later slide. Home Office with Theresa May. Links through to people like this. Peter Storr, International Cooperation, Home Office, Europol Management Board. What are these people doing? And here she is. This is the spider's web that we got Theresa May in. So we've got everything from Solace, where we've got executives working together. We've got Europol. We've got Common Purpose. We've got the security services, the policing college. How is the average member of the public supposed to keep track of this network that the police now sit in?
It's incredible, isn't it? But you know what? The reality is, of course, that all this information is out there in the public domain.
Yeah.
And fortunately, more and more people are now developing the inherent curiosity to try to understand what drives this insanity. And that's why, basically they daren't actually do anything that enables this to ever come to court. Because the reality is, of course, it would all be exposed in a heartbeat.
I'm going to add to that. It's not just court, is it? Because it's court with a jury. One of the big problems at the moment, and we had Neuberger, Mr. Neuberger, talking in the press today about the fact that there were problems between Britain and the European Union. And then he got stuck into the European courts and saying, well, they're not British because over here our law's based on common law. And yet what sort of courts is Mr. Neuberg running? He's running courts with a judge, no jury, no public.
Civil courts,
no
basically,
press.
yeah, civil courts.
Well, they're common law. Star chambers, I think is the right word. So put a bit more of this together. Now, this is partly historic, so some of these organisations have changed. But here's SOCA, Serious Organised Crime Unit. Here is Sir Stephen Lander, who was originally involved, and Sir Ian Andrews. Now, he's hopped across to the NHS now. So you can, 1 minute you're an expert in crime, you've done transport, and then you move across somewhere else. And then
but he's put into a job that he knows nothing about. I mean, this is it once again, isn't it? This is the tactic that we see, where an organisation is being targeted to be destroyed.
Yeah.
You put somebody in the head of that organisation who knows nothing about that culture.
I think you're absolutely right. They also have to rely on somebody to do what they do.
Exactly.
And so you can control them as they collapse.
Well, and they can be fed BS, and they wouldn't know any different.
Indeed. Well, here's the team around this man, Martin Thomas, or as was, adjudicator of Science Council Foundation. So lots of other connections. And the same here with Peter Clark. Now, he's involved with a private security company in Kingsbridge, so in Knightsbridge, I beg your pardon.
I think Kingsbridge is a bit close to home.
It is, yeah, that's why that popped out. And then we've got this gentleman, Francis Plowden, Children and Family Court Advisory Service. So this network is tied in where it goes over to organisations like CEOP that's supposedly protecting children. But why was I interested in this? Well, if we carry on following through these people, we end up with this little story. So we have a guy called Ian Hurst, an ex-army intelligence officer, but information that he's hacked or he's been given turns up in the law firm Bindmans with Tamsin Allen, and that then disappears into Lord Leveson's inquiry. And I think it was our first programme, we said, well, of course, in the Leveson inquiry, we had senior common purpose police people. So I've got to look at this lot and say, what is going on here between these people? I don't know. Is it transparent? No. Is it of concern? I think yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, this one we showed. We won't dwell on it too long. I can't read that myself, actually. Oh, this is MAPPA. That's right. This is MAPPA. And if people haven't heard of MAPPA, they need to, because multi-agency public protection arrangement where we've got the police working in local areas with hospitals, with schools, education, mental health, and they're keeping tabs on people that a team of people who operate behind closed doors have decided could be a problem. Have you heard of that Ian Crane man? Well, I think we need to get him on the MAPPA list, because a lot of people say he could be a problem. Brian Gerrish, he's out there talking about what's going on. Possibly the man's dangerous. We should track him through the MAPPA system. So you don't even know who's on your local MAPPA board. You're not going to see the minutes. You're just being tracked by a group of people in your local area. And there are 63 of these MAPPA cells throughout the country, with the police mixed with local council who's going to report on you, and mental health units.
Well, and of course it has to be acknowledged, Brian, that we are committing a very serious offence, which is encouraging people to actually look at this stuff for themselves. Not to take anything we say at face value, because we absolutely do not want anyone to take anything we say and just repeat it.
Check it.
That's what the mainstream does. We see repeaters all the time, people who simply take information and then just regurgitate it without any depth of knowledge or understanding for themselves. That's not what we want. By putting this information into the public domain, we want people to take it further, to take it deeper. And the good news is that the alternative research community is an amorphous morass that's growing at an exponential rate.
Yeah, and it's doing. And I think we're now at the stage where we are forcing stuff into the mainstream. They've got to cover it because too many people are talking about it. So last one here, I've touched on the suicides and the police, but we've got all this stress and pressure. And we have been in this programme warning the police that the applied behavioural psychology, the NLP, that's being used in their training colleges is dangerous. And here's the sort of thing that happens. So where are we going on this? Well, we can see it really in front of our eyes, can't we? We've got the police being trained and tooled up against an unarmed public. And we've got to say, why is this? Well, somebody somewhere knows that trouble's coming. So we've got everything from the water cannon and the taser to the...
I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever that the TA unit of the Greater Manchester Police would dearly love to be using the water cannon on the peaceful protest at Barton Moss.
I think that's absolutely correct. I had to put this one up because this was a crude attempt at an early head camera, and this was actually trialled in Plymouth. So, of course, the moment you meet this constable, you are on camera, and effectively you're guilty until proven innocent, I think is the way it works.
But the good news is that everyone now generally carries a phone that has a recording capability.
Yeah.
And so it cuts both ways.
Well, we've seen that in Barton Moss.
Exactly. And so it's absolutely critical that people are ready to use their cell phones to record any incident that they think may actually turn a bit dubious.
Yeah. Putting the police on the internet is an important thing. But this is where we are going step by step, unless all of us, the wider public, stop it. And just some characteristics of a police state. The individual's there to serve the state, not the other way around. The state is governed by a separate elite, well, who may or may not be elected. Well, take the European Union, but we've got many people cruising around government who haven't been elected, including Mr. Clegg, of course. The state is the law, and the state controls the legal process. Well, this is the secret courts. This is star chambers, one judge in a closed chamber, no jury, no public, no press, and that's happening on a regular basis. No such thing as a fair trial. Well, I think we could talk about a few of those. People being imprisoned without trial.
A bit like Robert Greene.
Who's sitting in Perth prison at the moment, and we're still not sure entirely what the charges are against him. Propaganda for the state takes precedence over the truth. Newspapers and media are state control. Well, we just shown the police controlling the press to do with Ian Puddick. The police are above the law, smashing their way into people's houses. The state maintains and funds extensive intelligence, security and police organisations. Well, that's all around Theresa May and her smart shoes. And the state is spying. People who call us constantly saying, are the phones monitored? Are you being listened to? To which we say yes. And here we go. Children are brainwashed with state aims and propaganda. We've just shown that. People are encouraged to spy and report on each other. That's even happening in the police. The state spies on citizens. Torture is an accepted part of the state apparatus. Now, we've already, with the rendition flights, we've had Straw and Miliband lying, of course, about what's actually happened as people have been tortured abroad with our security services present. We've had people shipped to America. The evidence is in front of our eyes, I think.
And if you expose the lies, then clearly your personal safety can be at risk, as Robin Cook, amongst others, discovered when he went walking shortly after having stated categorically in Parliament that, in his opinion, the attacks on Iraq would be illegal. And of course, indeed, they were.
And people had a lot of respect for him, and he has a heart attack. He's taken off by helicopter, but his wife isn't allowed in the helicopter, and he's dead on arrival. Well, somebody was warning about it here. This is Tony Bunyan's State Watch editor, said we can now see a pattern emerging across the EU where people who exercise their democratic right to attend cross-border protests are confronted by aggressive paramilitary policing, surveillance, preventive detention and expulsion. This is a reflection of the EU's definition of security of international events, which is now defined as covering both counter-terrorism and public order. And back in 2003, the bilateral exchange of information on suspected troublemakers between EU states for international events was agreed. That'll be us on that list.
It will indeed.
What is proposed now is not the one-off exchange of information related to a specific event, but a permanent EU-wide database of suspected, here's the word, troublemakers. This is utterly unacceptable in a democratic Europe. I'll finish on this, if I may. Cartoon created after a police squad attended a public meeting in Devonport, Plymouth. It was incredible. About 9 police in the room. The average age of the audience must have been 70 or 75. And somebody produced this wonderful cartoon. Break them up. 1 in 3 gets the ASBO. I don't care, she's 92. It just sums up the attitude of the police, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Brian, it's been an amazing first 3 editions of Humanity versus Insanity. Of course, what we've been exposing here is the absolute core of the corruption in British policing. It impacts on us all. And as I've said many times, don't take anything we say at face value. We need more people doing research. We need more people using the cameras on their phones. We need more exposure of outrageous and unacceptable police behaviour. As we have seen over the past few weeks, this country is descending very rapidly into a corporatist police state. It is up to us, humanity, to fight this insanity. I'm Ian R. Crane. Join me in 45 minutes on Fracking Nightmare.